Here at the museum, and hopefully we can take a hike somewhere to see some of this, as well as drive it. Workshop here, the myriads of different sized chips that were left, thrown off. Probably some of them were partially worked until they unfortunately broke or cracked and were discarded. This is one of the few mounds that's here, for whatever the reason, Hazlitt Mound. These are chunks of flint that a wall was created for some purpose. This man would have had the respect of the community for his skill at making all of these tools. Today, we are so specialized that the various tools we made and use have to be made by many different people, many different ways. In the same way, there would have been people who had superb skills at making bows and arrows using these tools. And perhaps this man and that man would collab and not use flint for jewelry as we do today. An irony. So here are grinding wheels made of flint stones. They were called burr stones. It would be a typical quarry. A man levering out a chunk of flint. This is a stone hammer, and probably some of our hammers are almost as heavy, but not quite. But what's truly distinctive are two things. One, the heavy weight at the one end of this hammer and the dull point. This you would chop down a tree with. It's hard to imagine you could get anything other than to bludgeon the fibers until they finally fell out rather than actually cut them. Another kind of addle here with a small bone projection tied into a knobby end of the wood that would hold onto your piece when you were throwing it. Here's your piece that you're going to throw in the projectile, if you will. See the little hole in the end? So it would fit in about like this. Somehow, about like that, I think. Yeah, there we are. Okay, this is a drill. It's pretty easy to use once you get it started. There we go. It's amazing how easy it is to use. Just keeps rewinding the opposite way. Now, I tried using that heavier one there, and I could only get a little bit done, whereas this one is just very easy to do it very lightly as I'm doing it right now. But the point is, everything, all the holes in the stones, all the holes in beads and shells, all had to be made with some little device like this. Versus when the trappers came, or the traders came, both French and the British, with their pre-made, pre-drilled beads that were manufactured. What a boon it was to the woman. Now, hundreds of hours could be saved. Okay, the museum docent let me borrow her map. This is it. I'll orientate us. To my left is the museum. You can see where it says museum, and the little black box is it. We're going to go right along the green. We're going to walk it all the way out to the back, and then all the way back around and to the red, and then follow the red back to the museum. Lovely walking these trails. There's very few people here, which makes it lovelier. These little depressions we see may well be little pits that were dug. Remember, this was not something that was found because the white man showed up. This existed for 10,000 years. It's astounding. I'm going by another quite large pit, more of a bog now. As you look across this little landscape, you see similar depressions. And some do not associate themselves with a creek bed, for example. Another on top of this mound. Imagine if during the 10,000 years we had wandered here, we might see individuals working about little pits, and then others gathered in the workshop areas where it was convenient for all of them to sit. And you wonder if they were in fact enemies. Would those have been places where not only they respected each other's lives, but also engaged in conversation, became willing friends, unwilling enemies? Pits seem very obvious because they're so anomalous. You don't see things like this conical, severe, or steep sides, if you will, with this kind of frequency. From that one here to the next one, and beyond it, I don't know if that was one or not. Could be a gully. Pan around, just surrounded by pits of varying size. Look at over there, how large that is. Here it looks like 1, 2, 3, maybe a fourth right there. And the interesting thing is, while I'm dwelling on the novelty of enemies sitting here making, mining the flint from which they will ultimately kill the enemy next to them, it's more important to remember that this was a source of the material for the entire toolkit for everything that this society did, all these societies did, within their community, for eating, for making clothes, for farming. It was the flint tools that were made, not just those that were weapons. We were walking along the perimeter of the ridge. Still you can see indentations. Here a very steep sided pit, if you will. Looking at this pit from another vantage point, you can get a sense of how deep these were. Like any other miner, you follow them down as far as you can. Their problem was they were limited in the tools that were capable of breaking into the stone if it wasn't already somewhat cracked. It's one of those few contexts that places into context, time-wise, 10,000 years, to realize that men dug with simple pole and a simple blunt stone axe out all of the arrowheads that we have seen in museums, not to mention the multiples of those that are lost to modern man, buried in soil. It gives us an idea of what 10,000 years means. All these holes, all hand dug. A lot of time. Here another large, deep pit, and you can see one roaming off to the right of it. As we drift back along the trail towards the museum, you don't see very many pits. Notice we're also falling off the slope of the ridge. However, in another area as I walk past are some more pits. This whole area littered with pits, if you can see. Fairly shallow ones, it seems. There are little pieces of small chunks of chert or flint littering the ground. Pieces. But as I keep walking down this slope, we're going to probably drop off this ridge significantly enough to not find any more flint or chert. That all now a bog area. The ground is littered with little pieces, shards. Whether these are the product of a workshop, of actual napping efforts. I don't really know, but it's not a surprise. There are apparently large mounds, areas that have so much of that rock that they never had any dirt fall on them, and so they're still bare, meaning bare of dirt, but covered with a layer of these broken chips of flint. As I walk back up the hillside in another location, the ground is covered with the flint outcropping. Have to make our way over these stones, and the trail goes around and over them also. I remember as a Boy Scout, I believe, how novel it was to find pieces of flint. Again, as we climb up, the ground is littered with not only small outcroppings of flint, but chunks of flint and pieces of flint. And we begin to see the pits again. We are now, and have been for a little while, walking along the green line on the left and going down on the map. Here's a deep pond, apparently, with what look like little mounds to the side of it, but I don't know if they are.